morning, everybody, and welcome to the Elation and DGX webinar. The topic for today is Mastering Critical Data Elements, a blueprint for modern data governance. So by way of introduction, we've got Tim Moon, the co-founder of DGX with us, Chad Barendse, data governance expert, and I'm Rob Aldridge, Senior Solutions Engineer from Elation. I'd like to throw over to Tim now, just to do a bit of an introduction and cover the background on critical data elements. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Rob. So just a little bit about DGX for many of you on the call here. We have over 350 people that have signed up for this, and I think we've got about 20 different countries around the world represented. So very exciting, but I'm certainly don't expect that everyone would know what DGX is or who we are. So we're an organization that offers insight, connection, and guidance to the data governance community. So insight through the training that we create. So we've created in Australia, we are located in Australia, APRA and DAMA integrated training that is practical and helps data governance people, practitioners really advance in their expertise and know-how in a variety of data governance areas. Connection comes through the events like these that we're running with Elation. We run in-person events as well, and to bring the data governance community together and strengthen it. And then finally, we provide guidance through consulting and advisory services. So that's enough about us. I know we've got 27 minutes and counting, so we'll jump right into it. I'm going to give a little overview on critical data elements and kind of what are they, where'd they come from, why are they important. So brief history of critical data elements and who cares. So if you are not in the financial services industry, it might be kind of who cares. This really, the genesis of this came from financial regulation in Australia. So Rob, if you click to the next one, what are critical data elements? So they refer to attributes, specific pieces of data that are critical, and probably shouldn't use critical inside of the term, but are very important, significant to an organization's operations, the decision-making processes made by management and senior people, very important in the risk management processes and structures within the organization. Obviously important to reporting accuracy and complying with regulatory requirements. Now, one little side thing here is that they're actually subjective. So this is one of the things that makes it hard, is there is not an objective framework that says, if this, then critical data element. So, and APRA itself speaks to kind of every bit of guidance that they offer is fit to the size of the organization and what makes the most sense. So that's what makes this space a bit challenging, and hence one of the reasons why we're really focused on it. Thanks, Rob. So where did it initiate? So it actually, in 2013, APRA published CPG 235. So that was guidance on data risk management. And the term critical data element first came on the scene just over 10 years ago now. Due to maybe lack of a lot of movement in that space, in 2019, APRA created the 100 critical data risk element pilot and kind of asked major banks to go out and identify their 100 critical data risk elements. So that's where it really started to get some momentum. And then Rob, flick ahead for me. In 2022, both insurance and superannuation started to get more focus from APRA. And so they were kind of pulled into the fold in terms of needing to demonstrate what their critical data elements were to help manage risk and to help manage, I guess, operational safety of the organization. Go ahead, Rob. So my final message, I guess, again, short and sweet, because I really want to spend the time looking at the framework that Chad is going to take us through and some of the technology demo that Rob's going to show us. But CDEs equal focus. They give data governance organizations within the company focus. And they do that in a variety of ways. First, through prioritization. So you have tens of thousands of attributes that float around from external parties and inside your organization. And they're not, or they shouldn't all be treated equally. And that's just because of overhead and time that it would take to treat them all equally. So it makes sense to identify those that are actually critical to your organization. The second reason they give focus is regulatory compliance. So, you need to identify these things in some industries, not all, obviously. But the point being, if you are not in a highly regulated industry and CDEs aren't mandated by the regulator, this is still just best practice. This is kind of, we talk about cornerstone of data governance, starts by identifying your critical data elements so that you have that focus. The third point, CDEs give meaning to data quality, or provides meaningful data quality. So you're putting your data quality efforts in a space that has the most impact for the organization in mitigating, again, data risk and just improving effectiveness in operation. And then if you have a risk function in your organization, again, financial services organizations do, integrating CDEs with that risk function will strengthen your governance through the whole organization, and is just another reason why CDEs are an excellent starting point for the health of your data governance and the way your organization manages data. So with that brief intro, and hopefully now everybody, particularly, again, I said kind of 20 countries on here, so maybe critical data elements might be a different term, just giving that bit of background. Now I'm going to hand over, I believe, to Chad, and Chad's going to walk us through the critical data element framework to give you guys some guidance on how to go about this stuff.
Thanks, Tim. And yeah, it's really great to be here. And so, yes, my name's Chad Barendse. I'm currently the data governance manager at NatWealth, which is very new. I've only joined the organization 4 weeks ago. But prior to that, I've been implementing data governance in organizations and working with CDEs for probably the last 7 years now. So I've worked at organizations like National Australia Bank, one of the big banks in Australia, MLC Australia, which is a big wealth manager here, and most recently Aware Super, where I spent the last 3.5 years, which Aware Super is a large pension fund in Australia. And so I'm here today to really share my experiences around how I've implemented CDEs and some of those learnings and challenges that I've gone through with doing that. And so I think CDEs are a really good tool to use, and Tim did a good explanation of what they are and why they're important. And so for me, I think CDEs are like really an essential tool for your governance program. They're really foundational. They help you really anchor your data governance program and create common language. And so CDEs, domains, data elements, it creates that common language around data that people can use, and also helps you prioritize effort. One of the things you don't want to do is try and boil the ocean. So CDEs and sort of prioritizing implementation CDEs kind of helps you prioritize that effort. And so I think that if we can go, so we've got on the screen is the CDE framework that I've collaborated with Tim and GGX on. And so really what you're looking at is what I would call the gold standard of implementing CDEs. Now, if you're a regulated entity, what you're seeing on the screen is absolutely what the regulator is going to expect to see in place when you're governing data and implementing CDEs. If you're not a regulated entity, you probably don't want to. You probably, there's some things you want to implement some of these things, and in other things you won't want to, and you've got to pick and choose what is right for your organization. And so in terms of the framework itself, I'd probably break it down into three kind of key steps. And so the first step is really understanding your data and ownership of data in your organization. And so it kind of pulls from data mesh concepts and data driven design around really working out what are those logical groups for data in your organization, and then assigning ownership. And so examples of that are, you've got your customer domain, that's usually your big one. You've got finance, you've got marketing. So you're really trying to work out, what are those domains you've got in your business, and then the key thing there is assigning ownership to it. And so once you've got a good view of your domains, I'd say the best practice is really to pick one, is to probably maybe pick the most important one, or pick one that has more maturity, and so there's actually resources that are there to work with you on implementing governance, and then try a pilot program. And so what that really looks like is, one of the first things you do, which is really step 2, is really working out what data is really driving that part of the business. And so what we do for that is it's really asking the question, what are the critical business processes that are done within that team. And so you can look to things like business continuity or business impact assessments for that. And that should, you're trying to get a handle of what is actually, what processes, what work is being done in that business, and then trying to work out what data is actually input into them. And so some examples of how that works is I've actually, gone through the process with the team. I've actually sat with them and gone through what screens they're using, what screens they're inputting data in, to kind of work out and trying to answer that question, what data is critical for that process. We also look at key reports and dashboards, and in the new speak now, we probably refer to them as data products now. So we're trying to really understand some of the data and reporting that's being produced by that team. And so it's really getting access to them. So we get access to them. We're trying to really understand the underlying data that feeds them. So we want to get access to them. We want to start sort of collecting that information so we can start putting it into a spreadsheet or a register. And then the final kind of thing is reg reporting. Reg reporting is probably one of the most important areas, because this is what the regulators care about. It's why they have brought in things like CPG 235, is because they want the data that's provided by the funds to be accurate, so they can appropriately govern the system. And so reg reporting is another key area. So it's really understanding, does that team produce any reg reporting, and then starting to collate all that information. So once you have that list, you'll have a list of a whole bunch of data elements that you'll have, and then it's about working out which one's critical. Well, which ones of those are critical. Now, before I go into that, I'd probably just mention that you want to have a systematic approach to this. You really want to go into every domain area and do the same thing in the same way, so you can build that view of what data is critical across the entire organization. You're definitely going to have areas where they use the same data, and it's key to start understanding that, what data is used in what area, what reports, and by doing it in a systematic way, you're really getting that view. And so capturing all that information is really, really the goal. So you want to be capturing all that information of who told you this CD, what reports they were used in, and that's what you start building out. So once you have that, then it's about working about what's critical. Now, you can do it a number of ways. If you're an APRA regulated entity, well, you need to do it based on a risk management assessment. And so in practice, what I've seen happen is you really sit down with your business and your risk teams, and you say, sort of propose a scenario. If this data was impacted, say 20 to 30% of the data was impacted, what impact would that have on the organization from a risk perspective? And most organizations have a risk impact matrix. They manage risk, and so really, for data to be a CDE, then it really needs to be that kind of upper end of that risk impact. So you're talking about major or severe or high, and so it's really when it comes to CDEs, less is more, because the effort, Tim sort of mentioned, the effort to put things under governance is a lot. So you really don't want too many, and so doing a risk weighted kind of assessment on it kind of brings that down, so you can focus your effort on the most critical. And so once you've gone through that, you should have a view of those CDEs. Now, then it's about formalizing them. So you want to agree the definition, so you're all on the same page. You want to document that rationale for why they're important. You also want to put it in a CDE register. And so, most likely this is going to be a spreadsheet in the start, but you may put it in a tool eventually, and later on in the presentation, we'll be talking about how you can leverage tools like Elation to manage them. So once you have your CDEs, we now need the third step is really putting them under governance. And so it's the things that the three items at the bottom of the diagram there. And so again, to just reiterate, this is the gold standard. So if you're an APRA regulated organization, or entity, the APRA are really expecting you to be providing evidence that you've got these things in place. And so the first one is really data lineage, and it's really the start of this. And we do this to really understand a little bit how this data, what this data is and how it flows to the organization. And so you're really trying to understand how it comes in, its source of truth, and how it gets there. And so some CDEs may have multiple sources of truth. I mean, you might have an advice business and a sort of a superannuation business, and you've got two different sources for information. So you really want to understand where this stuff lives, so we can appropriately put the right controls in place and measure quality. And so when we talk about lineage, there's kind of two things: there's business lineage and technical lineage. Business lineage is more of the kind of high level end-to-end system to system hops, as I said, from coming in to how it gets into the report. Technical lineage is usually you're talking about a tool, and it's usually from when you're talking about a data in the context of a data platform. It's usually when the data is from the source aligned into the data platform to how it gets to report. So it's looking at the technical transformations that happen to that data for it to get to from a source system into an actual report. And you're trying to answer questions about what was the source for this data. So you may have a metric or a report, and so knowing exactly what source systems it came from and what transformations happened with it is really what technical lineage does. And it is a really important part to get that understanding before you can do the other things. And so the other things, the next one I'll talk about is data controls. There's no heading there, but it's meant to be data quality. So you can have data quality controls or implementing data quality. You can do them at the same time. If you're an APRA regulated fund, you're really expected to demonstrate data controls. And so how these things kind of play together is once you have a view of how the data flows, you then need to assess the risk. And so assessing the risk, you're trying to work out what risks I have across that data flow, and then you'll be putting in the right controls. And then data quality is really about putting in data quality controls. So how I've done it in my organizations is I make sure I've got data quality rules in place for each CDEs, and we do it across the kind of 5 kind of key data quality dimensions. I know there's lots of different dimensions you use. The kind of key ones that I focus on are completeness, conformity, consistency, timeliness, and there's probably one more there. But we focus on, we don't focus on too many. We focus on a few, the key ones, and then we make sure we've got rules in place for each of those. We may have a couple of those dimensions covered in multiple rules. But I think from an APRA perspective, I think their wording is you need at least one dimension covered. And then what we do is, you'll have multiple rules against a CDE, and then we aggregate them into a score for a CDE. So you'll have a score for each CDE, and then we aggregate that into the domains. So then you'll have a data quality score for the domains, and then we aggregate into an enterprise score. So we've got a full view of data quality. Now, the way I like implementing data quality on the CDEs is because it really adds relevance to that data. This data is critical to the organization, and so we can monitor the health for that. So for the risk people in the room, KRIs, key risk indicators, are important for this for managing risk. And I've used the data quality score for our CDEs as that risk indicator. And so that's really taken everyone through the framework itself. In terms of the other stuff I probably want to talk about is really the federated ownership. And so you need people to actually do stuff. You need people to document lineage. You need people to confirm and define the CDEs. You need people to implement the controls. You also need people to manage the quality. And I'd say the biggest effort is actually in managing the quality. You're talking about putting hundreds of rules in place potentially, and then there's exceptions. Someone needs to do that. And so who does that in your organization is a big thing you need to answer. And so what I've seen is you either have a federated model, which is really where you're pushing that activity to be done by the business, and the data governance team is more of supportive, plays a support role, or you have a centralized model where the activity is done by a central team. And so then you've got a bunch of data governance professionals that are assigned to different business units. Or the third way is you've got a kind of hybrid of both. Now, in the organizations I've worked, it's most of the time it's been hybrid. you've got some areas that are very mature and they can absolutely do federated governances. Other areas don't have the resources and they don't have the maturity, and therefore a more kind of hybrid centralized model in terms of support is better. So that's probably all the things I wanted to cover. In terms of tooling, there's tooling is a big part of the discussion here. What I'd say is, to do this, you can absolutely do some of this stuff in a spreadsheet, and it probably makes sense to start off in a spreadsheet. But as you get scale, it gets very difficult to maintain that and do that. And so tooling becomes a very important part of the discussion. And so I'm going to hand over to Rob now, who's going to take us through how you can implement CDEs and governance over CDEs within the Elation product. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Chad, and thanks for a great intro there, Tim. We've got about 8 minutes, so I'm going to sort of show you how CDEs can be implemented and managed in Elation. Also, please feel free to add questions. I can see a lot of great questions in the chat. Feel free to add more, and we'll respond to them. And also, this webinar has been recorded, so we'll send it to you. All the attendees will get a copy of this. Okay. All right, so just let me hop into my demo environment here. So this is the Elation platform. We've actually created a document hub repository for critical data elements. I'll just show you some of the examples of some of the sort of key items that Chad covered in how you manage critical data elements. So firstly, this is a list of critical data elements. I'll pick the account balance one on the top here. And this is how we would present.
Rob, I can't see your screen.
Yeah, you see the Elation screen. Yeah.
Okay. Apologies for that.
Yeah, and thanks. Shout out to Gavin and Zach and others, Kamal, for bringing it to our attention. Yep. It was great, Rob. It was. I was visualizing it. I was right there with you, but
sorry about that. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully, you can see it now.
Yep, there we go, Matt. That's good.
Wow. Okay. So this is how you could represent a critical data element in Elation. So you've got a description of what it is, any acronyms, abbreviations, synonyms, and so on. Then you've got sort of the classification. So this is sort of the risk area that sort of Chad was alluding to, security classifications, the type of element it is, transactional, whether it's got PII and so on. The other area we can cover within workflows in Elation is actually attestation as well. So when you're actually creating that critical data element, you might need to approve it or review it and attest that it's certified. You can also do that within Elation using its workflow capabilities. Then you've got any other related business terms. So these could be definitions, other CDEs, for instance, can all be captured here as well. Along with range of sort of other attributes around ownership, stewardship, what domains it belongs to, and so on. And this can all be customized based on the type of CDE it is, what industry you're in, and so on. Finally, you can actually link it to the physical data element. So this is sort of an aspect of business lineage. So where does it actually reside in your physical data assets? So you can actually link directly to it from the physical data, from the critical data element. So if I click on that, it actually takes me to the actual physical data element. In here, it's actually the account balance. Similarly, you've got your descriptions here. Data quality, Chad mentioned, is critical. So you can have all your different data quality rules here. How it's actually sort of relevance or accuracy is a big aspect of the account balance in this case. And again, at the column level, you can also apply your classifications, related business terms, and so on. Similarly, you've got your ownership, your top users. So this is people that understand it at a data level, stewardship, domain owners, and so on. Lineage, Chad mentioned. So if I want to know how this particular column, in this case, as part of my CDE, is actually used both up and downstream, I can actually go to the Lineage page here. Let me hide some of this, switch it into compound mode. I can actually view the Lineage end to end here. So you can actually see the actual column itself. It's from the bank account details table, and you can actually see how it's used downstream in both other tables in Snowflake, as well as how it's actually used for reporting. So if I scroll this up, for instance, I can actually see all the way into Tableau, which field it actually ends up in for your APRA report, as an example. This actually allows sort of traceability all the way from the source to how it's actually implemented and used from a reporting perspective. The other thing I can do is actually overlay metrics on top of it. So if I want to put quality metrics on it, or warnings, for instance, I can actually add that to the actual lineage diagram itself. And this will sort of highlight any important information with respect to the actual critical data element. Okay, so that's sort of how you could implement a critical data element, all the way from defining it, getting it approved in the workflow, understanding the context around it, and finally the lineage end to end. Okay, so very quick demo. We've got sort of 2 minutes, so I might hand over for Q&A. So we'll try and answer as many questions, time permitting. If not, we can actually respond to them individually. We know who's asked them, along with the recording as well. So over to you guys. If you want any final sort of remarks, Chad or Tim, on the questions, any sort of key ones you want to call out. And, we can run a couple of minutes over as well. So
I think there's valid question around the difference between technical lineage and business lineage. And again, another subjective item, in my opinion. It's subjective. I mean, where I've seen it done at some organizations is high-level systems, and we kind of have pools of CDEs that move through those systems and through their own data lifecycle. And effectively, you're highlighting the risks around that data at different points in time and the controls your organization has, but it's at a much higher level, because you can imagine if you get down to the technical lineage that Rob just took us through, trying to have all that stuff in there, while probably possible, just can get a little bit chaotic. So maybe something worthwhile in future that we can do a business lineage demonstration, as it seems like there's a bit of interest in that. Trying to look at all the comments, there's a lot of action here, which is fantastic. So question Amarnath has around CDE: does it have to be atomic data element in an operational system, or can it be aggregated column in a report? Yeah, it can be both, right? Yeah. So it can be a derived value or an individual attribute. So these are the sorts of decisions why kind of learning more about this stuff and kind of maybe going into training. So I'm going to put in, you guys know we did this for many reasons, to get the community together to talk about an important thing. I've just put a link in around our training that we do on how to go out and identify your critical data elements. I mean, Chad has shown a bit about the framework, and in the training, we actually give you templates that are, I think, extremely useful for the price of a training. So we show you a register and what a CDE register would look like. And we provide you more detail on what sits behind the framework itself, so you can go off and kind of, ABC CDEs within your organization. So I put that link in there as another place to have further conversations. As always, I suppose any one of us is always happy to have discussions. It's what we do, data governance. Not the most exciting thing for many people, but you've got 3 guys here that may be a bit different that way. So
awesome. I think we're out of time, Tim. Thanks everybody for attending first, and thanks Chad and Tim for the great commentary and insight around CDEs. This webinar will be shared with everybody who attended. Thanks for attending and giving us 30 minutes of your time. Appreciate it.